So the Muslim who is practicing here in America faces a dichotomy, and it's problematic. It is difficult. It is difficult because, especially in the milieu, in the content we find ourselves in, where we are under scrutiny, where the media, the government, Homeland Security, FBI, they're all looking at us as a fifth column, as a threat to their security. And one of the things that they're bringing is that these guys are radicals. They want to establish the Sharia. They want to take away our system of government and replace it with their system of government. That's not like other groups that don't like many of American morality. For example, the Amish. For example, many of the other groups, Orthodox Jews, they have a different system, but they don't think that their system is universal for mankind. The Jews think their system is for themselves. The Amish don't want to spread. If you want to be an Amish, go join the community, but they're not going to come to New York and give da'wah to the Amish way, right? We, for example, it's a requirement that we give da'wah to Islam, okay? So they're bringing points which, in all honesty, from their perspective are valid points. From their perspective. And we have to defend our religion and our American identity together. Our religionness and our Americanness. It's definitely a problem. It's definitely an issue. Call it a problem, call it an issue, as it says, difference of semantics. Some people might get offended if I say it's a problem. Fine, it's an issue that we need to discuss head on. Okay? And the reality is, I'll put you at ease now, or maybe put you more at ease. I can't give you all the answers in 20 minutes. I don't have all the answers. I don't. But one thing I do know, we need to bring up these topics in public. And we need to let our youngsters, our elders, our ulama, all of us begin to think about some of these implications. Our political scientists, our leaders, our masjid coordinators, our MSA, activists, we need to bring up these issues and be open about them. And when we do so, a lot of things will happen. One of them, inshallah, we'll discuss some possible solutions. Another one, we will put our quote-unquote host country at ease, where we will show them that yes, we understand the dichotomy. We understand your unease at certain aspects, and we're trying to find out a way that we can preserve our religion, be fearful of Allah and the Sharia, not be, rejecting the Sharia, and at the same time live comfortable and peaceful lives as loyal American citizens. Now, as I said, I don't have all the answers here, but I do have some issues that I think we all need to ponder over and think about. Of these issues, we need to understand the delicacy, the precariousness of our situation. It is definitely a delicate and a precarious situation. How so? In the history of the Ummah, never before has the context of Western Islam existed before. Traditionally speaking, Muslim armies went and conquered other lands and they became the leaders of those lands, but the people generally remained non-Muslim. This is a common myth, by the way, that when the armies conquered these lands, they converted en masse. No. When Muslims conquered Egypt, when Muslims conquered China, when Muslims conquered India, for centuries, the majority of the populations remained as non-Muslims. They didn't go and convert them en masse. For centuries. In fact, most of the conversion occurred in the 4th, 5th century, such that by the 6th century, the majority of the inhabitants were in fact Muslim. But for example, even Egypt, the majority of people in Egypt for the first 200 years were not Muslim. They kept on increasing the percentage by peaceful means, by seeing the reality of Islam, but Islam was never forced on them. Never. And that's one of the beauties of our religion, by the way, that it was never forced on the people. But the point being, what did that do? What that did was, it allowed Islam to be in a position of power, and other religions to be in a position of weakness. And Muslims could show their true identity with a sense of pride and honor, such that it became a positive thing to embrace Islam. You were actually more prestigious, culturally speaking, societally speaking, as a Muslim. You were better respected as a Muslim. And for example, let me give you a real life example in Rwanda right now. Maybe some of you have read what's going on in Rwanda. In Rwanda, around 7 years ago, 8 years ago, there was a horrible massacre. Millions of people died. It was a massacre that was an ethnic war between the Hutu and the Tutsis, two tribes in Rwanda. They began to fight one another. Civil war broke out, and millions of people died. This is in our lifetimes, in the mid-90s to late 90s. Alhamdulillah, the Muslims of Rwanda, who were around 8 to 9%, 10%, the Muslims of Rwanda, their Islam prevented them from taking part in this massacre. And the Christians, who were the majority, many of them used their Christianity to perpetrate the massacres. Many were the Catholic priests, many were the religious clerics who actually got involved in the massacre. What happened after the massacre was over? The UN didn't react at all, America didn't do anything. None of these people who clamored for human rights and democracy, none of them lifted a finger to prevent this massacre that could have been prevented literally in a day if they wanted to. It's a third world country, doesn't have any arms, nothing. Most of the massacres took place by swords, not even by machine guns, swords. In any case, after the massacres had finished, the reputation of Islam obviously became much, much more positive. New York Times had a number of articles, one of them a few weeks ago, Arab News as well, an article last month, which talked about the phenomenon of Rwandans accepting Islam after the massacre. So much so that in the last 8 years, the percentage of Muslims has doubled than what it was for the 50 years before that. Doubled. And there was an interview that I read of a child who converted to Islam. He escaped the massacre, he saw about cruelty and whatnot. He converted to Islam. He was asked, didn't your parents object when you converted to Islam, you left Christianity? He said, my parents were the most happiest of people when I converted to Islam. They loved the image of Islam because of the massacre. They loved the image that Islam was a peaceful, loving religion that prevents its people from doing these terrorist acts. Can you believe this is in a country in our times where the image of Islam is a positive one, the exact opposite of how it is viewed in many places. Point being, getting back to the point, so Islam spread amongst the population like it is spreading now in Rwanda. Who converted? The local populations. The Coptic Egyptians became the Muslim Egyptians. The Hindu Indians became the Muslim Indians. The Buddhist Chinese became the Muslim Chinese. Hence, when they converted, the local people did not view them as foreigners. They didn't view them as strangers. These were their brothers, their friends, their cousins. These were their own, their Bani Jins, their own nationality. There wasn't a fear factor. There wasn't a factor of strangeness involved. The same applies to pretty much most of the other countries. Only recently, for the first time in our history, has there been a mass exodus of Muslims from Muslim lands to other lands. Only recently. Of course, the reason for this is also, historical, and the rise of the nation state. Nation states are a new phenomenon. Secular nation states did not exist, in the past. This is a new phenomenon, especially post World War II, and becoming, getting naturalized and becoming citizens of a country, and the ease with which it can be done. These are all new phenomena. The ease of migration, historical, sociological concepts. The point being, though, never before were such large quantities of Muslims leaving Muslim lands, or predominantly Muslim lands, and coming into these modern secular Western lands. Never before has it occurred. And the greatest such immigration occurred in our own lifetimes, from our own parents. Our parents were the ones, well, for those who are second generation, our parents were the ones who make up the statistic. They left their countries and they came here to this land. And of course the reason they did this, really, let's be honest, it was monetary, it was financial. Very rarely will you find another reason, but the number one reason why our parents left the lands they did to come here was to earn a better life. Through education, through job, through whatever. And they came here, bringing their Islam with them, but not really and truly thinking about the future in terms of Islamic perspective. They weren't thinking, they were in the prime of their youth like many of us are now.